They're not well trained. They're not well equipped. They're just pushing them into these battles like Soledar and Bakhmut, taking massive casualties for very incremental gains. And what they eventually take control of is they've largely destroyed in the process of actually seizing.
How significantly does it change the battle?
Well, it's hugely significant, and it's significant symbolically that this next step is being taken. It's very significant substantively on the battlefield. The tank is the centerpiece of combined arms operations, which are what will be necessary to have successful offensives this summer, maybe late spring, by Ukraine to take back, to liberate more of the territory that Russia has occupied since 24 February. That tank is the piece around which everything else will be built. There are infantry fighting vehicles. We're already providing those, training them in Germany. There will be artillery. We've provided a lot of that. There will be air defense, engineers, electronic warfare, EOD, drones out front. But all of this exists to get that tank to the decisive point on the battlefield and to keep it essentially invulnerable from the various threats that could be presented to it.
And so the tank really is the centerpiece. And you're saying the M1 Abrams, from your experience with it, is as impenetrable as a vehicle as exists.
It's extraordinary. Obviously, during the fight to Baghdad, I was a 2-star general. If it employed correctly and you keep the enemy's infantry away with their anti-tank guided missiles, you clear the obstacles and mines and so forth, that 120 millimeter cannon is enormously powerful and effective, and it will take out anything else that is out there. Yeah. But the key is you've got to have those as the centerpiece. Of course, you got to train on those, and so there will be an effort, I'm sure, very quickly, if not already ongoing, perhaps training them on our tanks before these tanks are procured by General Dynamics, and then the others that are going to come, the Leopard 2s from Germany, Poland, and the other European countries that have them, as well as the Challengers. And again, this is only a third of what it is that Ukraine would like to have in a perfect case. This is quite a powerful.
But it's enough,
this is a lot. This is multiple battalions, probably 2 brigades at least, of armored and mechanized infantry forces with all of the other elements around it. And that can be a very powerful punch. And it could enable them to break through in some key areas and ideally deny Russia that opportunity to support the elements in Crimea directly from Russia. I think it puts the support for Crimea. I don't think it puts Crimea. That's a whole different military problem. It could enable the Ukrainian forces to get the multiple launch rocket system with the precision missiles in range to take out some of the very important air and naval bases and so forth in Crimea. But to sever the ability to support Crimea would be of enormous value and enormous importance.
Do you think a real escalation of a nuclear situation is on or off the table right now?
I think it's unlikely, highly unlikely, because I think we've communicated effectively to him that this would put him in a worse situation after its use than before. And that has to continue to be the message. Look, we have to do everything we can as quickly as we can to enable Ukraine to show Russia and to show Putin that this is not sustainable, that this war is not sustainable on the battlefield, where they've already lost 8 times the soldiers they lost in nearly 10 years in Afghanistan. And also, by the way, through our financial, economic, and personal sanctions and export controls, which we need to tighten further to show Putin it's unsustainable at home. He's actually doubling down. He's just announced, and his Minister of Defense has confirmed that they want to increase the size of their armed forces by 150 to 200,000. So trying to get the military industry stood back up. And again, we have to convince him that this is not going to achieve the progress, that this is going to be a losing proposition, because until then, there will not be meaningful negotiation. There is not going to be that kind of support. And these lines have been drawn very, very clearly by President Biden, the NATO Secretary General, other leaders of NATO countries. We should be doing everything we can to enable Ukraine. By the way, keep in mind that Ukraine, a country less than 1/3 the population of Russia, has out-generated forces. In other words, it's done better at recruiting, training, equipping, and employing additional combat capabilities, supported by, $27 billion just in arms and assistance from the United States alone, as well as others. The M1 Abrams tank, the U.S. main battle tank, it's much heavier than the others. It's a good 10 tons heavier than the Leopard 2, the German tank. It's much more difficult to maintain. It's a jet engine, basically a turbine, 1,500 horsepower turbine surrounded by armor. The spare parts and all the rest of that, the diagnostics are very, very challenging. That said, if giving 14 tanks, say an armored company's worth of tanks to Ukraine, allows the Germans to provide Leopard 2 and, as importantly, to approve the transfer of Leopard 2s that other countries have, Poland, the Baltic states, Finland, some others in NATO that have those, then I think it's very much worth it. And I think it's time to get on with this, frankly. This is another one of those pivotal moments in Ukraine. The battle lines have been pretty static. Russia has been making incremental gains at great cost, but they're on the offensive. We know that Ukraine, they've said that they are planning an offensive for the spring. If they're going to have competent and capable combined arms capabilities, so not just tanks, but also infantry fighting vehicles, artillery, mortars, air defense, engineer, close air support, etc., you've got to train for that. Some of that is ongoing right now at our training base in Germany. Tomorrow is the hugely important gathering of the coalition that comes together of NATO and Western countries to provide arms, ammunition, and assistance to Ukraine. I think it would send a very important message for us to say, look, if giving, again, 14 tanks of ours to free up the Leopard 2s that other countries want to give, Poland is eager to do that. And by the way, many of those will be replaced by the M1 Abrams tank ultimately. Let's get on with it. In addition to what are reportedly going to be very important other announcements by the U.S., which of course has done an incredible job of leading the world in providing staggering quantities of arms, ammunition, and material, over $24 billion just since the beginning of the invasion. And this seems to me to be a pretty modest increment in that, yes, it's a strategic decision, but we should get on with this. Obviously, on the battlefield, where he's already lost probably 9 times more soldiers than the USSR lost in nearly 10 years in Afghanistan. That has to continue, tragically, terribly. But also, there have to be further efforts to tighten the financial, economic, and personal sanctions, and also the export controls, so that what Putin is trying to do, 2 days ago, he announced his plans to increase the size of the Russian military by 150 or 200,000 soldiers. There's another conscription drive expected. And he's trying to revive the military industries in Russia to provide the arms and ammunition for this expanded force as well. Again, he's got to be convinced that this is unsustainable on both the battlefield and on the home front. And that takes a lot of activities, comprehensive approach to do that. But above all, there has to be unwavering determination on the part not just of the courageous Ukrainians who have demonstrated that in spades, but also among the Europeans and the Americans.